The 5 Live Cricket Show.
Good evening and welcome along to 5 Live Cricket with me, Alison Mitchell. For the next hour, we're going to be looking at what cricket can do to make the game more accessible for everyone. And alongside me is the former England international turned broadcaster and board member at Surrey, Ebony Rainford-Brent, or Ebony Rainford-Brent MBE, as it is now, Ebs. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Fresh off it last week and meeting His Royal Highness. Yeah, no, really honoured and really looking forward to this subject today as well. It's one that's very close to my heart.
Indeed, it was a visit to Windsor, wasn't it? And
it
services
was.
to cricket and charity.
Yes, it was. I had to get the curtsy out. I got the first one down. The second one was a little bit ropey, but it's okay. We managed.
Well done, well done. Look, we will get into a bit more on your role as chair of the ACE programme as well as we go through the show. But first of all, just this broad question. I mean, it is important, isn't it, that sport is accessible to all? Sum up why it's so important for you.
Yeah, look, I think first of all, sport is the fabric of our society. I think it's something that is so powerful. And I think in young people's development, that's what I'm more passionate about, is young people getting access to a sport. And I want to see as many young kids growing up, trying a sport like ours, cricket, and wanting to play and falling in love with the game. Whether it gives them anything meaningful, I don't think it matters in terms of going anywhere to play at a high level. I just think it's about young people being able to develop them skills, build community, friendships, and connecting with others. I don't think there's many better sports than cricket. To me, cricket's like life and the different types of people that it can bring together, the types of environment. And so, as our sport and as we kind of go through, a tough time, I would say, over the last few years with cricket, I really, really want to see us start to move up the rankings to become one of the most popular sports again in terms of participation. For young people in particular, but young people from different backgrounds and lower socioeconomic as well. So we've got a long way to go.
Well, that's partly where ACE comes in, isn't it? You're chair of that programme, which you set up in 2020 to engage young people from African and Caribbean backgrounds in the game of cricket. And you're right, cricket has had a bruising time over the last 6 months and since 2020 even. It continues to, with the necessary follow-ups from Azim Rafiq's testimony in front of the Parliamentary Committee last year. But as we start, Ebony, are you feeling optimistic or pessimistic or reserving judgment about the direction that the game is going?
Yeah, I have to be honest. If you'd asked me 12 months ago, I was maybe deep down quite negative and not sure we were going in the right direction. What I would say is the conversations have completely flipped over the last sort of couple of months in particular, I think after November as well, and the attitudes and the awareness of how we've got to really improve cricket to become more relevant to society and support more different people. And because I've seen these conversations really open up, and the awareness is high, and also I'll say the accountability now is high, the conversations for me have changed, and I've shifted to hopeful. I know that if the work is done and we continue to do the work which the game is trying to do, we can see results. And so I would say I've shifted. In the last 6 months, I feel like we're going in the right direction. We've just all got to make sure we get on the train and go together.
Okay, so hopeful. I'll check in with you again after the next 60 minutes and see if that dial has shifted a little bit more either way. Well, let's get into it then and start with some facts and figures around British Asian representation at the playing level. Now, the ECB estimates that around 30% of recreational players are from the British South Asian community. But at professional level, this drops off to about 4%. So that's a huge gap. Now let's speak to Tom Brown, who is a researcher from Birmingham City University, who's done a vast amount of research into this area. He also set up the South Asian Cricket Association, which aims to increase representation in the professional game. Evening, Tom.
Hello, you all right?
Yeah, good, thank you. Numbers indicate that sharp drop-off. What have you found, or what do you believe the barriers are leading to that?
Well, I mean, that's the big question, isn't it, really? Why does that happen? And firstly, we had to look is that a reflection of the talent pathways, or is that, and, we need to get people into the talent pathways, or is it that players are in the talent pathways and can't convert? And it's the latter, really, that the talent pathways are really well represented. It's just trying to get through to that final step of becoming a professional player. And I think through a lot of our research, we've done several studies, and to try and narrow it down as best I can for a radio show, the short answer is I think there's a bit of a cultural ignorance on both sides, really, as to how to maximise the talent and how to subjectively assess players' performances. So I think the current system at the moment does rely a lot on the subjective views of coaches, and if those views aren't informed around cultural norms and behaviours and learning styles, then unfortunately some of these things can be misinterpreted and actually go against players when really they're trying to do things that would show respect or show engagement in their own ways.
So quite an educational piece sounds like it is needed, Ebbs, listening to what Tom's saying there.
Yeah, look, and I've spent a lot of time. Hey, good to see you, Tom, or speak to you even. Look, we spent a lot of time ourselves talking about, and I also understand from a slightly different background. You know, my mum was Jamaican, and you have very different ways of expressing yourself. And I knew when I walked into the world of cricket, and we're not talking about South Asia, I'm talking about sort of being Jamaican heritage, that you could be misconstrued. Labels came onto you about lazy because you didn't seem to be projecting yourself in a certain way. And you know, it took me a long time to, you know, I think I only became successful as a player because I dropped a number of those sort of cultural ways and adapted to the traditional cricket world. But what
rather than just being yourself.
Rather than being myself. And we also have done a lot of, you know, we started looking into our young people's experience in ACE at the moment. And one of the things that comes up quite big for them is they feel they can be themselves and identity. So what Tom's talking about, you know, and a lot of my friends come from the South Asian communities. I grew up in inner city London with a melting pot, and I can see clearly how things can be misconstrued. And it's, you know, if you're not in the position of power, that's the problem, right? If we had maybe more Asian coaches or black coaches or people from working class backgrounds in those positions of power, they would understand and be able to educate. The problem is the game isn't sort of set up in that sort of way. And so I guess I'll throw back to Tom, because the question for you from my end is, can we crack this? You know, this is a big nut to crack, but I think there's a very different problem in different communities. But this feels like the Asian community have the best chance because there is representation. Where do we go?
Well, yeah, I think that's the thing, isn't it? That all different communities are at different levels in terms of what assistance that they require. And like you say, the Asian community are pretty much there to the final step in the men's game. It's very different in the women's game, where the representation doesn't appear to be in the pathway at all. But I guess there's two options, really. You can either, and I think we should do both, really. There should be an education program from both sides, sort of, this is what's expected of you as a player, and going the extra mile. Instead of judging players for how well they fit into the performance environment, go the extra mile to make sure they understand what's required of them in that environment, especially when you compare someone who's sort of white British and been to a private school. The mannerisms we're looking for are certainly, especially around a character assessment, or around, you know, white privately educated, how they sort of address themselves and hold themselves up, etc. But the other thing you can do is objectify the talent selection system to try and mitigate those biases. So try and find things, something like resilience, or something called your perceptual cognitive skills. So the ability you have to anticipate bowlers' cues, for example.
And are those truly measurable? There is the sort of science to do those kind of tests.
Well, resilience is tough from a talent ID perspective, because at the moment the best way we have of doing that's a questionnaire, and if I'm being really honest, if I knew a selection was on it, I'd probably lie. I'm incredibly resilient.
Of course.
But perceptual cognitive skills, definitely, there's several studies that have highlighted how to do it, and it's something that the game could adapt. There was a really good study in Australia where a few academies basically implemented this, and half the lads got training, half the lads didn't, and the lads that got it shot on and dramatically increased their performances. So these types of things could really help mitigate biases, but also improve our talent ID and development systems.
Yeah, it's an interesting area, isn't it? And what about you mentioned private schools. Overwhelmingly, numbers of test players for England are white and disproportionately privately educated as well. I guess, you look at private schools, there is the money there. Cricket's an expensive sport. You need facilities. You have lovely cricket fields. You can have ex-pros to be your professionals at school. How does that gap get bridged so that children attending state schools can actually have a level playing field?
Well, if I'm being really honest, and it's a bit of a pessimistic view, it's going to be incredibly difficult to level the playing field completely because of all the things you've said there. I mean, there's also like I said before, the other stuff that comes with it, like being part of a smaller class size, so you develop better psychosocial skills and learn how to converse with other people, etc. But I think we have to be looking at some sort of program, or if not to go into schools and upskill state schools, then we have to look as a game as to how we, almost from a positive discrimination point of view, help those from state schools to try and provide them with the experiences that private school kids get as soon as they leave our training facilities. And that will require investment and a lot of sort of evaluation as to how we tread the balance with positive discrimination programs.
Yeah, I'll chip in there actually. One of the number one things we did when we were looking at ACE, and we haven't closed this gap yet, but we're working on it, and is contact hours. So if you take a traditional young person, could be 12 or 13 at a private school, during cricket term, they could be getting 30 hours a week. They've got all Wednesday dedicated to sports day, so they're playing fixtures, they're playing Saturdays, Sundays. In between classes, they're getting one-to-ones. The contact hours we're able to, for example, at ACE Academy, give the kids is 5 hours, 3 to 4 hours on one day, and then we've managed to up it to sort of around 8. But that is still a long way away, and so you think about closing that gap. I do think there are ways of tackling this as well. One example would be, we work with Whitgift School, for example, who partnered with us over the last recent. And I think the private schools can actually use their resources from a sort of community and social outreach perspective to help. There's no way that, there's no doubt that the access to the amount of facilities, pitches, etc. And so they've done things from offer residential space during the summer so we could get really intense and get more contact hours. They've offered really low cost to access their nets on hours that works for them, but also a bit of support to others. So I think there's ways that we've got to look to get those hours up. But I think the one thing that we have to be clear on, and from my perspective, is getting as many contact hours as close to the young people as possible.
Tom, I want to just ask you about the work that you are doing with Kick It Out, because you've got a role alongside Michael Carberry, the former England international as well, haven't you?
Yeah, so me and Michael have literally just started a role together, and I think collectively he's obviously got the experience as a player, played all the way up to the top at Test cricket, and obviously was vocal about his own experiences in the game, and then I sort of bring things together from a research and data perspective as well. So together, hopefully, we can collectively make some good suggestions as to how we can move forward, because I think the one thing we're very keen on not doing is just producing another report and actually trying to identify areas to make action and move forwards.
Tom, thank you for being with us. Tom Brown, researcher from Birmingham City University, who helped set up the South Asian Cricket Association. Speaking of reports, you'll remember that the ECB set up their Independent Commission for Equity in Cricket, ICEC. Cindy Butt is chairing that. That's looking at gaining evidence. Written evidence has now been taken. A report is expected in autumn, and that does centre around evidence based on experience, actual lived experience, Ebony, to make sort of real life recommendations to the ECB. So are you feeling sort of all eyes on that as a step forward?
I think it's going to be, again, a bit more of a shock. I think... what we started seeing after what happened with Azim Rafiq is experiences starting to come out, more and more details, more and more, and we heard maybe more from the professional side. But I think the experiences in grassroots and community hadn't been logged, and I know thousands have put in, and that's maybe taken a long time to process. So I hope, what I do hope, whatever comes out, I'm not going to be shocked by experiences. I've experienced myself many things, and I know I've heard stories. What I think is key, and Tom kind of talked about it in his work with Kick It Out, is tangible actions that will lead to change. And I think you can always get quick wins, get started, get moving, and then draw out some longer ones, which are going to take time to embed into a sort of a big institution. But I just want to see tangible actions that come out of that report. So I think it's going to be another spicy one, if I'm honest. But I hope it continues to lead to more conversation and awareness, but rapid change. We need change.
Well, talking of action, tell us more about the ACE programme then, because since it launched in 2020, more than 6,000 young people have engaged with it in some form, which is incredible numbers. How are you sort of measuring, I suppose, what does success look like? It's not just about numbers, is it?
Yeah, look, first of all, I'm impatient. So when I was talking about wanting tangible change,
surprise us.
Yeah, you know me very well, Ali. Myself and Chevy, who's the director of programs, and also Richard Gould, who was the outgoing chief executive at Surrey, but still a trustee on ACE. We all just wanted to move. We didn't want to wait and create these long strategies of how we'll engage. Let's just get out there, test and change. And we were set up, just for people's understanding, ACE program stands for African Caribbean Engagement. There'd been a drop-off by 75% of professional players. The black community were less than 1% of participation. These numbers were going backwards at a stark rate. It wasn't a new problem, but it needed some urgent action. And we started off by thinking, let's just try and find the best people who are out there, young people who we could support. Let's not lose a generation of players who could then inspire the next. And we marketed it very well. BBC helped out all the different channels to get the word out. And we had 100 young people turn up. And quite a few had decent levels of talents, which shocked us. We weren't sure if it was just going to be kids who fancied to try. No, actual kids who weren't within the structure but had the talent to play. And so that kind of accelerated change. Sport England said, can you work backwards and create what you think based on our models? And Chevy's worked in development for years, what you would do to sort of break these barriers down and get in. They gave us $500,000 to do it, which was kind of like, wow, okay, thank you. But also they set us the ambition to go national and try and tackle these problems quite well. So London was very different. London, we were able to get in. We got into schools, hub sessions, which are communities, tried to work everything we could to get the timings right, the locations right, the right coaches, reduce all equipment problems, cost, it's all free. We did all of that sort of stuff. London was moving quickly. Birmingham, we'll be honest, it needed a good 6 months of re-engaging the community. It felt like it had dropped off a cliff. But now, sort of a year and a bit later now, we're starting to see that movement we wanted. And then Bristol, we got going, which is mostly more similar to London, had some momentum. And so I think each city has a different dynamic. But what was clear, and I think this is the one thing that I want to make clear, and I understand it from growing up in a more lower socioeconomic area, it was important to spell out to kids, schools and parents this huge opportunity there was for their young people. So, and I'm not saying that everyone's going to go on and play for England or anything like that, but the point was, whatever, if your kid has potential, whether that's a love of the game or wants to go as far as they can. And so we created this thing called a golden ticket, and we say, right, we're going to hand these out to young people who show that little bit of extra, either excitement during their sessions or talent. And I think that shifts the perspective, because then parents who, my mum was working nights, 2-3 jobs. When you say, come to this session, they're having to make that extra effort, but also realizing, look, we're going to support their kids as far as we possibly can. And I do think that's made a difference. So the young people on the journey are really trying to enjoy the sport, but also fulfill their potential. I hope that ACE, what does success mean to us? I do want to see representation in the professional playing. But also, I think what we're seeing is young people are now, whatever love they have for cricket, whether it's sports media, whether it's, different parts of the sport, we're starting to give experiences for them to be able to get wider into sports. So maybe we'll have a chief executive one day who came through the ACE program. So our vision really is to just really help diversify cricket.
You mentioned costs, and we're going to come on to that in a moment, but we actually managed to send our reporter Jamie Reid down to one of your ACE sessions, Ev. So have a little listen to this.
I love it. It's so much fun. It's just great. I mean, it rings everywhere. It's just so fun.
Yeah, so I'm Tracy, and I've come today with my son, Rafi.
Okay, and Rafi's clearly enjoying himself. Tell us a little bit about his experience and how much he loves the game of cricket.
I mean, this is his favourite club of the week. He does a couple of after-school clubs, but coming here is the highlight of what he does after school, and especially because it's in such a amazing venue. I mean, it's not often that you get the chance to come into the Oval. It's not a sport that's usually offered at school. I know they do a lot of football and basketball, but they don't do any cricket, as far as I know, as part of their normal kind of PE curriculum. So it's really nice that he's getting to try something different.
So you are?
Anaya.
And?
Alakshi
and Anaya.
I used to think it was just men playing, but when I watched the hundreds and I even watched the World Cup, seeing the women, then I could do that too.
Yeah, you can do it, absolutely. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. I was actually one of the first people here, well, the first, and from the day one, I came here thinking, oh, this is a little thing I can enjoy. But after being here for like a few months or maybe a year now, I think I want to carry on with it for longer. And it's also helped me take chances like represent Lambeth in the London Youth Games. We actually both did it, and you get to make super cool new friends like Ilakshi here.
And one final question to you both, because the woman behind all of this is Ebony Rainford Brent. What does that name mean to you?
I'm really happy she decided to have this amazing idea, because if she hadn't, I probably wouldn't be into cricket right now, and I'd still be at home not liking sport.
I'm really happy for it, because if she didn't make this, I would have never had a new friend like her.
Oh, there you go. I wish this programme was video streamed, because if you could have seen Ebony's face listening there to Alakshi and I, you were beaming. And then you went quite bashful when she said, if it wasn't for you, she'd be sitting at home. You're making a difference. Let's speak to somebody who is graduating through the ACE system right now. Troy Henry is part of the ACE programme, is captain of the academy team and doing his coaching qualifications as well. Troy, good evening to you.
Good evening.
Thanks for coming on. Just tell us, first of all, then, how did you get involved in ACE? Had you looked to get into cricket any other way before?
So I'd been playing cricket since I was 4 years old. I've played for Hertfordshire County and a club called Leverstock Green, just 5 minutes away from me. But there was someone called Steve Stevenson who promotes a lot of Caribbean cricket in England. And he found out about the ACE programme and told me to go down to the Oval and have a trial down there. And that's how I got involved with it.
Fantastic. What has it done for you? What's your experience of these sessions been?
It's generally been amazing to think that a lot of international cricket players have played at the Oval, obviously professional cricketers, not a lot of people get to use those facilities, and it's one of the most amazing experiences.
How different has it been to, I suppose, the pathway that you were on before? Why has it helped you particularly being involved in ACE, other than obviously being able to tread the wonderful green grass of the Oval?
It's been quite good due to the coaches. We have lots of level 3 coaches, so if I want to be developing my game, I can ask the coaches any questions to help me get there. Because my aim really is to be a professional cricketer, and obviously with this programme, it can help me represent myself and put myself out there to perform in games such as playing against other counties and stuff like that to get recognised. So yeah.
Yeah, Troy, we've got Ebony here, of course. You all know her.
I was going to chip in. I was going to say as well, one thing I've been proud, and I've watched a bit of your journey, and I know your mum as well, Holly, who I don't know if she's listening, but if she is, hello.
Hello, Holly.
Hello, Holly. But one thing I've noticed how hard you were. Obviously, Chevy made you captain, but one thing that stood out is the fact that you were prepared to change your bowling, for example. So you've now become a spinner. I've seen you working hard. I guess the question to you is, you were putting in the hard yards at the moment. What is inspiring you to do that? Is it wanting to play? Is it making mum and dad proud? What's it for you?
A bit of both, really. Obviously, I've been playing since I was 4, so I've had a genuine love for the game. But also to make my parents proud. They've been taking me everywhere, watching my games, supporting me to the max, really. So to make them proud, that would mean a lot to me.
And what are the boys like? Is there a lot of banter? Come on, tell us what it's like down at a traditional session.
Yeah, it's quite good there. It's always a challenge. Everyone's trying to get each other out, hit each other for sixes and stuff like that. But yeah, it's quite good.
Troy, we wish you the best of luck on your journey, and maybe we will see you in the pro game.
We need a few ACE wins as well this summer. They've started this season. We've had a decent start.
No
Troy, are we going to get some wins?
No doubt.
What's Ebony like, Troy? That's what I want to know when she comes down to the sessions.
Loud.
She likes to get involved in commentating quite a lot of. When we have competition in the nets, commentating. If she sees a big shot, she'll shout it and stuff like that. But yeah.
And just before I let you go as well, I mean, what are you learning from the others that you're playing alongside in the ACE programme as well, the others that you've met through doing this particular programme?
It's quite beneficial because obviously all of us are not the same, so we're learning other skills from each other. So like I could be learning someone else's how they bowl and what they bowl to what field and stuff, and understand why they do that and stuff like that.
Yeah, learning all the time.
Yeah.
Well, Troy, we'll keep an eye on how you progress in the ACE programme and indeed beyond.
And some wins this
It's all about the wins.
Of course.
It's not the taking part, it's about the wins. Troy, thanks so much for joining us. That is Troy Henry, who is part of the ACE programme in London. Now, Ebony, you mentioned that the ACE programme is free at the moment. I mean, one hurdle in cricket and sport in general really is about accessibility due to finances. And, not everyone can afford to play cricket because you've got to think about playing kits, you've got to think about the cost of coaching, you've got to think about the travel. Now, earlier in the year, Matt Pryor, former England wicketkeeper, spoke out about this, saying the average cost of age group cricket is £1,000 per child each season. That's around $400 to $450 in coaching, he was saying, a minimum of £300 on kits and then travel. And he was saying, this should all be free. A couple of things then, Ebbs. I mean, are talented youngsters being priced out of the game, and should or can coaching and cricket just be free?
So first of all, I mean, I saw Matt Pryor talk about this, and I was really great because obviously his profile, his level of playing, I think he's got such a voice, and to hear him kind of highlight a big issue. Let's be honest, my mum worked nights, I got free school meals, and when you said £1,000, I mean, some households could be on 12,000, 15,000 as the main earner. That's the cost of your electricity bill for the year. That's a killing a household. There's no way someone can afford that. For us,
electricity bills now.
Yeah,
shot up as well.
Now you had inflation and the costs going through the roof. Let's be honest, it's not happening for lower socioeconomic families at that level. Now, where I got lucky, my mum used to struggle. I remember when I asked her for £2, which was the first cost of a course, and she did it, but it was through gritted teeth each week. It was really tough. But I had one fortunate lady, a lady called Jenny Washrat, who got me a number of scholarships. Once she saw me, Brian Johnston, I got sports aid continuously. Without those, there was absolutely no way we could pay for travel, equipment, everything. I was fortunate to get all of that, and Jenny proactively supported me. So the question is, that is pricing people out, and I think I actually don't think equipment is much of as a barrier as we think, because once what we've seen with ACE, for example, is if you say to the kids, "There's a kit bag, you're all right, don't worry about that." That's not so much of an issue if you can provide sort of group kits for kids. But the truth is, once you start stacking up those costs, the parent's going to say it's not happening. And we need to find a way. I don't know if free is the answer, but I think very, very low cost, because I do think there's a little bit of value, actually, whether you put your 50p, your pound, or £5, £10, whatever it is. I do think you get value by asking people to contribute to the environment.
Pay what you can.
And pay what you can. But that number's got to drastically come down. And I think it's got to be along on the lines of a lot of other sports. Get that down to a few £100 throughout the year, and maybe supported different levels that really support people. So for me, that's got to change. I'm glad Matt Pryor spoke out, and I think counties have got to look at how they really, really break that down.
I mean, there's the programmes to get children into cricket. You've got the ECB run, the All-Stars and the Dynamos, and that's sort of 40 to £50, depending on where you are in the country, for either 6 or 8 sessions across the summer. And, even that can be expensive. With that, you get the kit, you get a bat, and you get some stumps. But, that can still be a barrier. You mentioned Brian Johnston, and that is the Johners Trust, isn't it? Which, and I'll declare an interest here because I'm a trustee, but it offers grants to talented youngsters who are in the system already, whether that's, regional for the girls or age group county for the boys, specifically to help with, finances, getting to training, buying kit. And I have to say that applications this year, you could see that it was also pandemic exacerbated as well. Parents who had, lost a job during COVID and not gained it back yet. It might be a family who have suddenly suffered, a real blow with ill health. The main breadwinner has had to go into hospital, or so many stories. So there are some schemes to help, but it's firstly, I suppose, knowing about them and also knowing the right way of sort of getting that help, and you were fortunate to have that mentor who understood your situation.
Yeah.
And that's got to be also part of what you're doing with ACE, is actually personally getting to know the players, like with, Troy very well. But yeah, if you know your players, you know actually who needs that little bit of assistance.
Yeah, look, I think there's simple things we can do. I would like to see, for example, when you're doing your registration or you got a young person, simply asking questions like, how are you getting to the session, can give you a lot of information. For us, some young people will be coming by bus, by tube, and you sort of start to probe, okay, will it be with you, with your mum, sometimes once you get to know the young person, you realise there's something going on behind the scenes where you can add value or support or reduce that problem. Equally, we've had other parents who say, do you know what, we're in a good position at the moment, we will cater. So I think there's no doubt that we've got to understand the young people, but equally we've got to get as much through, because it's great that we can give the elite, the top percentage of young talent, but actually we want more coming through the door, and so we've got to reduce that number significantly.
Now, our next guest is a Scottish international and a star of the inaugural 100. Abtaha Maqsood is with us, leg spinner with Birmingham Phoenix. Abtaha, welcome to 5 Live. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Very well. It's great to speak to you again. Tell us, first of all, your journey into cricket. When did you start and how?
So I used to play quite a lot of cricket in the garden with my dad and my 2 brothers. So that was back when I was pretty young. And then I think I was about 10 or 11 when I talked to my dad and my mum about getting me into a club. And they had a look, and they found it really difficult to find a women's club. So they kind of told me that they had found a women's only club and took me over to Pollock Cricket Club in Glasgow. And I had a look, and it was actually a team full of boys, and I was the only girl. So they kind of made me go there by telling me that it was going to be a women's only club, but I'm glad they did it anyway. But that's kind of how it started, and then I started playing for Pollock when I was about 11, and then from then on started playing for the Scotland under-17s when I was about 12, 13, and then made my debut for the full Scotland team when I was 14.
Yeah. So Abda, when you sort of burst onto the scene with the 100, suddenly playing in such a high profile tournament, you're a 22-year-old Muslim female player, you bowl leg spin, you wear the hijab. What was last summer like? Because you attracted an awful lot of positive, well, from the outside it looked positive, and did it feel all positive to you? How did you feel that you were received, and what was the experience of the spotlight of last summer?
The 100 was amazing. It was bigger than I ever could have thought. But yeah, it was mainly just positivity. A lot of positive comments on Twitter and other social media, and just so many nice comments from people in the crowds as well whenever we walked around the boundary. So it was just a whole load of overwhelming positivity. But there was always going to be some sort of negativity out there as well, which I got on social media a little bit. But as a whole, it was very positive, and I can't wait to do it all over again, hopefully.
Yeah, you said that you are very happy and want to be a role model for young British Asian females. Do you feel that you've sort of helped to open some eyes? And are you cognizant of what some of the barriers might be, particularly amongst the Muslim community when it comes to women in particular playing cricket?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think when I was younger, I didn't really know about the cultural barriers as much, and I think that's mainly because my parents and just my whole family were so supportive and didn't let me see that there were any barriers, which was amazing from them. But as I've grown up, and I've seen messages on social media and stuff like that, and just had different interactions with people, I am aware now that there are definitely cultural barriers out there, and it is difficult we all know it's difficult for women to get into sport anyway sometimes, but it's even harder if you're a South Asian woman, just with those cultural barriers. So I have definitely faced some of that, but thankfully for me, I've had 2 really supportive parents who have always helped me through it all.
Abtaha, it's Ebony here. Just a quick question. I'm asking this partly out of personal kind of thinking about my journey in cricket. And I never really had to talk about race or ethnicity or black people in cricket until I'd finished playing. And then that became more of a thing. Whereas I guess you're in the heat of your career and you're talking about these big issues and society's change. Do you feel pressure at all? Does it add pressure to your performance, or is it something that you're able to kind of coexist with and feel comfortable with?
I try not to think about it too much. I think for me, it's actually quite motivational whenever I hear all the positive comments from different people. As I said, when I was walking around the boundary after nearly every single 100 game, I had loads of people come up to me and just tell me about how I'm a role model for them and stuff like that, which was so wholesome and so nice to hear. And things like that actually like motivate me more to be the best cricketer that I can possibly be. So it can be a little bit of pressure, but for me it's more motivational.
What positive changes have you seen around you already, either when you're with Cricket Scotland or with Birmingham Phoenix, around the idea of the inclusivity and the understanding of the different cultures that might exist within a cricket team?
Yeah, I've actually seen quite a lot of changes, especially in the past year, which has been really good positive changes, especially with the Scotland women's team. I've always felt really comfortable playing with them. I've played with them since I was 14, so I have always felt quite comfortable. But the amount of times that those girls ask me a whole load of questions about my culture and faith and beliefs is actually really... I really enjoy that because I've said this before, like I would much rather people were to ask me questions about those sort of things rather than just assume things about my faith and my religion. So I actually really like it when people ask me questions, and that sort of thing happens quite a lot in the Scotland team, and we're all very open and honest with each other about it. And we've had a lot of really good, honest conversations surrounding race and religion and stuff like that. So I've always felt really comfortable with every team that I've been a part of so far.
Are they curious about how you manage sort of elite fitness in sport around Ramadan in particular?
Oh yeah, definitely. We get questions around that pretty much every year. It is tough, and Ramadan just passed, and it wasn't an easy month, but yeah.
How do you juggle it?
It's quite, I mean, you kind of just get on with it after a while. People usually tell me that, I could never do it. I could never fast for 30 days and play cricket. But if you were to actually do it, you actually do just end up getting on with it and just doing it. But there is a lot of planning involved as well. I try to do a lot of my gym stuff or like conditioning work after after sunset, when I can eat and drink again. So there is a lot of planning, and I do talk to my S&C coaches and nutritionists and stuff like that, just to make sure that I'm keeping safe and well.
Yeah. And are you noticing that, I mean, for example, would catering around cricket, include halal food now, whereas it might have not have done in the past? I mean, I guess this is something that goes all the way through, club level, recreational. If you're playing on a Saturday afternoon at your local club and there's sort of sandwiches afterwards, or whatever it might be, it's sort of having that awareness to, I say cater for in the literal sense, but broadly catering, whether it's prayer rooms, whatever it might be.
Yeah, so in terms of food, actually, when I was younger, more teenage years, I actually used to dread teas during cricket, just because there was nothing halal there. It was always like cheese sandwiches for me. They didn't really cater that well for Muslim players, but one of my teammates who now works for Cricket Scotland as well, she kind of watched me grow up and watched me be the cricketer that I am today, basically. And she's tried to incorporate as much halal food and stuff like clothing as well. Like I don't wear shorts, I don't wear short sleeves. So she's kind of made sure that all of that, I have access to all of that in terms of food and clothing. So stuff has definitely changed, and there's a lot of positive change coming about. So yeah,
Yeah, I mean, clothing is a whole nother topic, isn't it, Ebs, we could do in terms of, young girls' engagements and, cricket's wearing whites when, young girls are starting to menstruate and the sort of body image that they worry about. But yeah, Abtaha, if you could sort of wave a magic wand, are there still areas that you would like to see further positive change in? What would they be?
I think for me is just trying to make sure that, with South Asian girls in particular, there's so much talent out there. I've seen firsthand the amount of potential there is in terms of cricket in particular, just because we love cricket so much back in Pakistan and India and the subcontinent. And I've seen that firsthand, and I just want to make sure that we're not wasting that talent and we're making sure that we're making the most of it. And trying to target these girls as much as possible, and not losing them when they start growing up and those cultural barriers start to kick in. So we need to try and find a way to make sure that we're as supportive as possible and as welcoming as possible to these girls.
Abtaha, it's a pleasure to speak to you as always. Enjoy the season ahead and look forward to seeing you in action with Birmingham, Phoenix and indeed Scotland as well. That is it.
Thank you very much.
Abtaha Maqsood, leg spinner with Scotland and Birmingham Phoenix. Now, this season marks a world first for disability cricket when the ECB Disability Premier League launches, bringing together deaf, learning disability and physical disability cricketers playing against and alongside each other. Now, Ian Martin is head of disability cricket at the ECB and joins us. Evening, Ian.
Good evening, Ali. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Good to have you on. Now, you've said that a league like this doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Look, there's plenty of disability Premier Leagues elsewhere in the world, but they're all impairment specific, meaning that the Disability Premier League in India, for example, is just for players with physical disabilities. The one that we're going to run over here is for all cricketers with hearing impairments, cricketers with learning disabilities, and cricketers with physical disabilities. So basically, what we're saying is that we're taking the best from our national squads and from our domestic system, mixing them all together and providing a best be best competition. Because what we recognised was that making the step from domestic disability cricket up to England level is quite a big leap. So what we wanted to do was to increase the standard of competition just below the England level, and to players in the domestic game another tournament to aspire to be part of.
So what are the challenges going to be then of bringing those different disabilities together?
Well, we ran a pilot last year to take a look at how this would work. I mean, we felt that the format would work anyway, because obviously we know the players really, really well. But until you actually take a look at it and you run trial games, etc., similar to what the 100 did a few years ago, you think the concept's going to work, but until you actually see it in place, you're not too sure. So we ran a pilot last year, and it exceeded all expectations, to be honest. The players were amazing. They all wanted to learn about each other's disabilities. And we even had an example where we had a wicketkeeper who had dropped a catch off one of the deaf bowlers. He then went and learnt the sign language for sorry, so he could go and apologise to the bowler. So there's all that stuff going on. It's brilliant to see the way they've all pulled together. And they're all interested in seeing how each other navigates their own challenges to play the game at the level that they do.
Yeah, that's breaking down barriers in its own way, isn't it? In sort of internally
Absolutely.
wise. I mean, one thing that I always note about the disability cricket at the elite level is that, and this is an all-male league, isn't it? One area of disability cricket which still needs to evolve at the elite level is women's disability cricket. Sort of where is the game with that, Ian?
Well, I would say for Disability Premier League, I've got some news for you. We do have our first female player playing in that.
Oh, so it's a mixed league as well.
It can be a mixed league. Once we get more female players of standard, absolutely, it's a mixed league. There's no problem at all with females coming in. Ultimately, the aim would be to have a separate female league. And there is work going on to attract more female disabled players into the game. I'm doing a lot of work, or starting to do a lot more work, with blind female cricketers, with a view to an England female team taking part in the International Blind Sports Association World Blind Games next year, which is taking place in Birmingham. And cricket is going to be part of those games for the first time ever. So we're hoping to have an England men's and an England women's team participating in the World Blind Games next year.
That'd be a first.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, Ian, it's Ebbs. We go way back, so I know you don't need to know who I am. But actually, don't tell any dodgy stories. But anyway, I guess
plenty.
my question, I guess, is I'm intrigued in the sort of the pathway. So this Premier League is going to be kind of the icing on the cake, and I really like it. What are we seeing in terms of sort of the step below, which might be the sort of developmental phase? Are we seeing enough coming through from the grassroots into those environments? Is that increasing, so that sort of funnel of talent is getting better?
Well, the one thing we do know is that participation is increasing in disability cricket. We work in partnership with the Lord's Taverners and their Super Ones programme at the entry level. We also have an ECB-funded programme called Champion Clubs, Disability Champion Clubs, of which there are now over 100 across the country. So we know we've got youngsters with disabilities coming in at the participation level. We've then got pathway competitions called Super Nines and D40, and they are for deaf and hard of hearing, learning disability, and young cricketers with physical disabilities. And then we've got a separate blind cricket pathway as well, where we've got a domestic blind cricket run by Blind Cricket England and Wales, and also an international programme to go with that. But in addition to disability-specific interventions, there are also disabled players playing in mainstream cricket, and we estimate that in total there's over 72,000 disabled people accessing cricket on a regular basis throughout the summer. So from a disability sport perspective, 72,000 participants is a significant number. So it's a very, very well populated sport, if you like, by the disabled community. And I put that down to really the flexibility of the game and the way that coaches can adapt it according to the audience that they're working with. So you can adapt the format of the game, you can adapt the equipment, all to suit the nature of the disabilities that you're working with. And as we discussed earlier, if you're talented enough, you do have the opportunity to aspire to DPL level and onwards up to England level. And you might be aware that there's a learning disability and a deaf England team departing to Australia in June to compete in an Ashes series. So the opportunities are there for disabled players that want to get involved.
Are they flying economy or business class, Ian?
They'll be flying business.
So there you go.
That is progression. That is good to hear.
That's sort of where the women's game was several years ago, wasn't it? And so that is sort of investment. Ian, thank you for filling us in and giving us a little bit of an overview. And yeah, that will be a world first for disability cricket with that the launch of that Premier League, and then the Blind World Games staged in Birmingham next year. So a women's blind team for the first time. That is certainly progress. It's Ian Martin, head of disability cricket at the ECB. Ebbs, we've had sort of an hour of looking at various aspects, and there's still more aspects you could delve into when it comes to accessibility. You were hopeful at the start of the hour. How are you feeling now?
Yeah, definitely still hopeful. I think we've covered so many different areas: socioeconomic, different ethnicities, religion, disability. And there's a lot of work being done, and there's a lot of hard work being done behind the scenes that I think people deserve credit for. We've just got to keep reducing the barriers. It's as simple as that. And I think if we chip away and get really laser focused at what those barriers are and learn from experience, get the data as well, and back those two things up. How do people feel when they're accessing our sport, and what are the numbers telling us? And I think if we keep both of those things in play all the time, we can see change. So I'm happy. I think in the next 10 years, if we all get our heads down, we can make cricket shoot up there again for team sport.
And how do you think what do you believe the best success measurement of success is?
Yeah, look, there's two things I keep harping on about. The number one has to be experience. And there's so many ways to measure experience through stories. I'm sure the ICEC work will tell us about experience. I think you've got to understand how people feel. If someone has a good experience the first time they go to a club or a session or an environment, whatever their background is, they will stay. Then after that, we got to measure it. We got to look at the numbers and the more coming through the door. So there's so many metrics that we could go into, but I think if we marry those two together, experience of how people feel and then capture those numbers, we can see success.
And Ebs, a very, very final thought is, what can we do as the media to encourage greater participation?
Well, I think what we've seen actually in the last year and a half from the media has been exactly what we need. In terms of these big issues have been brought to the surface and the stories keep having to be told. And I think by just highlighting and asking big questions and keeping the sport accountable is what the media needs to do. Share the positive stories, because there'll be plenty, but also tell the areas that we need to improve. So I think the media can keep shouting about it.